Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. I'm going to show you a classic open tournament scrap between Raunak Sadhwani, 16-year-old prodigy from India, and Simon Williams, the Ginger GM no less, a fearsome attacking player. Now, this was played in the Rejkjavik Open, currently taking place, and it's a great tournament. I played there decades ago and I absolutely loved it. Great atmosphere. The Icelanders really love their chess. And in an open tournament, you've just got to go for it. And this is a cracking example of that. And let's crack on. So here we go. Raunak Sadhwani playing white. D4, E6. So with this move, Simon basically invites white to play E4, and then they would go into a French defense. That's an old favorite of his. But instead, Raunak plays C4. And now Simon goes for his favorite Dutch defense. Well, for an open tournament, you know, you want to play something adventurous. You know, you want to play for a win. And of course, the Dutch gives a game that is just really double-edged. So I think a pretty good choice. And the Stonewall variation. I mean, I've played this a few times with black, and I like it that you get this security in the centre. You know, a solid stone wall. And it does give you perhaps chances to attack on the king side later. Of course, there is a big disadvantage in that it weakens this square. You can see a pawn can no longer cover that square. And Raunak immediately tries to take advantage of that by going for bishop a3, exchanging off these bishops, and that will weaken that dark square. So this is the classic positional strategy that white employs in this opening. So queen e7, now that prevents bishop a3 for a moment at least, and then a4. So Raunak is persisting. So he's definitely going to get that in. But I suppose you could argue that the queen is reasonably placed on e7 anyway. a5, so that takes some control over b4. Bishop a3, so Raunak carries out this positional strategy. Castles. Now, it's all very well going for this. The problem is that this knight is actually really poorly placed now. You can see it doesn't really have any prospects here. So over the next few moves, Raunak basically redeploys this knight. If we could play the knight to d3 in one move, that would be good. It wants to look at the e5 square, and it's going to head there via c2, e1 and d3. So this is a classic maneuver. And Simon brings his pieces out. So white continues with knight e1. And now this is the so-called problem piece, the bishop on c8. You can see at the moment it has no moves. So b6 is a very normal strategy to develop it. Now Simon goes to bishop b7. You could go bishop a6 here. I mean, I think it's kind of a question of taste really. But, you know, they're both reasonable ideas. And rook c1. Well, you can see that with the pawn on c4, then white sometimes has the option to take here and to use the c file. So rook c1, of course, very normal move. And c5. So that opens up the diagonal for the bishop. So that's reasonable. And now over the next few moves we have a kind of shadow boxing takes place. e3, neither side wants to exchange, neither side wants to commit, but both sides just bringing their rooks into the middle, all very sound strategy. I was slightly surprised by this next move from white, rook e1. I sort of understand that it's, you know, looking at the queen if the position opens up, but I don't think the rook is particularly well placed there. I mean, I would go for just moving the queen, probably queen e2, and then looking to play to b2. I think that's sound. In any case, rook e1. Reason I'm also not too keen on rook e1 is that, sometimes it's nice to have that rook on f1 to make sure f2 is well supported. Anyway, it doesn't make too much of a difference. Maybe it's me just being a little bit fussy. Knight e4, of course, is a good move. The knight slams onto the outpost. h4. Well, they always say, don't weaken your king side. Don't move pawns up in front of your king. But positionally, this makes a lot of sense because it's preventing black from playing g5. And white very often wants to play knight f4. So the h-pawn supports that knight, basically, prevents g5. But of course it raises the stakes again because it is a slight weakening. Queen e2, yeah, that's where the queen needs to move out. Knight f6, okay, white has to be a little bit careful. So therefore now knight e5. So, white has carried out this strategic plan to occupy e5, which basically was set up by this move bishop a3 in the exchange of bishops a long time ago. So now we can see the downside to playing f5. It weakens that square, and eventually that could spell trouble for black's king because the king is a little bit open once the f-pawn moves. But I still think this is a reasonable position for black. I quite like taking here, actually, and playing rook d6. And then perhaps doubling here. That's not such a bad plan. Rook c7. I'm not sure about this. The rooks are split for a start. It's not quite clear to me what this is for. Queen b2 I like. The queen comes to a very good diagonal, and the queen, perhaps has options here. Queen e8. So yeah, a bit of the shuffling and shadow boxing continues. Sometimes that queen can head out here, which might be interesting. We never know. Rook c2. So again, shuffling continues. h6. Right, now we can see things are starting to happen. So now we can understand why queen e8 was played. Covers the g6 square, so don't have to worry about knight g6. And black wants to get in g5. Rook c1, so patient build up. g5, so here we go. I think it was Bronstein that said the Dutch defence really is nothing. If you can't advance this g-pawn to get the attack going, then forget it. This g-pawn advance is really an integral part of the Dutch because black needs to try and crack open lines, and that g-pawn can support the f-pawn advancing to try to get through to white's king. So it's time for white to open up the other side of the board so that the battle is absolutely raging now. Of course, there is a downside to g5 along with f5 in that the king is looking really drafty now. Black might be trying to attack, but whose king is safer? Well, I would say at the moment it's clearly white's king, but let's see. Pawn takes pawn, just played. Bishop takes pawn. Knight c4. So the knight is looking at that b pawn. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. And here, actually, there's quite a nice way for black to play. One can play here, and then rook g7, and actually just give up that pawn and go for f4. And that is extremely dangerous. A lot of pressure there. But rook b7 played, defending that pawn. That's kind of rare hesitancy from Simon. And now knight e5. So the knight returns and the rook has options on the c-file. So, I mean, black desperately needs counterplay here. So f4. Well, if the g-file opens, then, yeah, the rook can switch into the attack. So g4, white tries to keep the king side closed. And now the position gets absolutely mental. So here we go, h5. This is absolutely crazy because now the white king starts to open up after this move. I mean, you can see it's just completely fluid on this side of the board. And with the rook perhaps switching over to g7, this is starting to look just completely random. Knight takes pawn on g5. H takes g4. And now rook c7. Well, that's a good move, of course. The 7th rank is open. The king is really exposed, and of course it prevents that rook from reaching g7. So rook c7 looks like an excellent move, and well, it's still incredibly double-edged. f3. So black has trumps as well here. Shuts out the bishop. Okay, let's see. Knight f7. Wow. Okay, it looks like basically the Dutch is getting undone here because the king is so exposed. But black is now a piece up. Pawn takes bishop. So what on earth is going on here? Okay, I'm going to leave that question with you. I'm going to have a slurp of tea. And while I'm having a little drink, you have a think. How would you play here if you had white? White to play. Slurp tea time. I mean, this is a mad position with these pieces invading. It's like the players have just kind of ignored each other, and it's like a game of chicken. You know, the pieces have crossed. Black has broken through here, but no major pieces in. What should white do here? Well, white should take here and play rook c7. This did not happen, but this is very powerful. So, okay, just to give you an example, bishop attacked. If the bishop moves, then knight h6 check. If the king comes here, then that is absolutely decisive. So the rook blocks the queen out, and knight g6 mate is threatened. And if the king goes the other way, check. That queen coming good on this diagonal. Rook blocks, rook f7. Black has to give up the queen, and well, the rook is going to go, and of course that's winning for white. So rook takes b7 and rook c7, the best way for white to play. Instead, Raunak played knight takes rook, which doesn't look too bad. And then rook takes rook, rook takes rook. Okay, and now I'm going to flip the board round. Okay, I'm going to mess with your heads. Now you're looking at it from black's viewpoint. Now it's black to play. What would you do here? What did Simon play here? Black to play. Okay, time for another slurp of tea. Cheers. Black to play. This is absolutely incredible, because with this next move, Simon completely turns the tables. Knight g5. This is brilliant. Threatening knight h3, followed by g1, and game over. And that pawn is covered by the bishop. And that is a problem. If pawn takes knight, queen h5 is the follow-up. And magically that queen appears, and there is absolutely no defense. I mean, you can give up the rook, but now what? Basically the checks run out, and that's decisive. I mean, this is incredible. Raunak played f3, didn't make any difference. Pawn takes pawn, still a threat of knight to h3. He took the knight, and queen h5 was also winning here. Game over. Absolutely no defense. Wow. Unbelievable. From the jaws of defeat, Simon pulls off a fantastic, well, not just a save, but an absolutely brilliant win. That's the Dutch defence for you. I'll flip it around so you can see it from this point of view as well. Knight g5. f3 takes, and queen h5. An amazing game. So a good scalp for Simon. They've played so far, let me just check. I'm recording this after round 7, and actually Raunak has 5 out of 7. Simon's on 4.5. So there's been some cut and thrust, but it's very tight. I will report back and let you know what happens. At the moment, after 7 rounds, the Dutch player Max Warmerdam is leading with 6 out of 7. But I will report back and let you know exactly what happened in the Rejkjavik Open. But do check it out. You'll find coverage online, and it's a really great event. Thanks for watching.